With Godzilla Kong of the New Empire out now, well, that means that we're seeing a whole lot of big monsters on the big screen. Godzilla, Kong, Shimu, these things are walking through skyscrapers and destroying cities with ease. So what better time than to take a look at some of the biggest monsters that we've ever seen, and to find out which one is truly the biggest. So let's get to it. Rathalos are flying dragons from the Monster Hunter series, known for being highly territorial and incredibly aggressive, willing to attack anything that comes near it. They typically stand at around 46 feet tall, so if everything else to come on this list, definitely coming in last. I'm not sure if Starro the Conqueror technically counts as a monster, but he's definitely big enough to make this list. Coming in at 150 feet tall, he might not quite be as big as Godzilla, but he's definitely got the city-destroying part down. In the Monsterverse, Rodan might technically be one of the smaller titans. That doesn't make him any less powerful. He's 154 feet long, able to fly at supersonic speeds, spew lava around, and destroy cities just by flying over them. The legendary sea monster of epic proportions, coming in at 200 feet tall, the Kraken is so big and powerful that he's able to give the Greek gods nightmares. If there's one thing we learned from Qui-Gon, well, it's that there's always a bigger fish, and the biggest of them all is the Sando Aqua Monster, the biggest creature living in the oceans of Naboo. We don't know much about them. They're more myth and legend than anything else, but that doesn't stop them from eating everything around them. There were three incredibly powerful monsters in the Rampage movie. Easily the biggest of them was Lizzie, the gigantic irradiated nuclear alligator monster. Coming in at 225 feet, she's able to easily channel her inner Godzilla and plow through buildings and whole cities. With a giant blade for a nose, Knifehead definitely lives up to his name, and at over 300 feet tall, he's proved himself to be one of the deadliest kaiju in Pacific Rim, and the only one who was able to defeat Gypsy Danger in a one-on-one fight. There are a lot of terrifying monsters that live out on Tatooine. Chief among them are the Crate Dragon, particularly a super species that has 16 legs, grows to over 300 feet, and can spit out corrosive acid if you ever disturb it under the sand. Methuselah was discovered near Munich, Germany, where he was covered in a forest and actually appeared to be a mountain while lying dormant. He's incredibly large, incredibly tough, and incredibly powerful, but is almost biogeological in nature, constantly blending into his surroundings and disguising himself as an island or mountain or other landforms. In the Monsterverse, while Kong started out at just 100 feet tall, he was still easily the largest version of the big ape we'd ever seen. Then he had a massive growth spurt, grown to over 330 feet tall as he rivaled Godzilla himself. He's taller than the Statue of Liberty. He's bigger than the Pyramids of Giza. Kong is just big. Raijin is kind of the unofficial leader of the kaiju in Pacific Rim Uprising, being the biggest and the most powerful. With his big Venus flytrap-like head, the ability to turn your own attacks against you, Megatokyo never really stood a chance. Definitely one of the weirder iterations of Godzilla. After Shin Godzilla finally finished evolving, he stood at a massive 389 feet tall, and he definitely is intimidating at that size. Shin Godzilla is almost like a demonic version of the big monster, especially when he showcased what his next form was gonna be. This version of Godzilla from the Monsterverse is easily one of the biggest, and one of the most powerful versions of the monster we've ever seen. He can plow through buildings and destroy skyscrapers like it's nothing. No Titan has been able to stand up against him. truly cementing his place as the king of the monsters. While there are a lot of terrifying titans in Attack on Titan, definitely the biggest and most intimidating out of all of them is the Colossal Titan. It towered over everything around it, and is easily one of the biggest monsters we've ever seen. The Mega Kaiju is technically 3 kaiju combined in one. Raijin, Hakuja, and Strikethorn all merged together to form the most intimidating kaiju we've ever seen. Next to it, the immensely powerful Jaegers, who are able to easily beat kaiju in their sleep, couldn't even stand a chance. The MCU has its fair share of monsters throughout it, although most of them tend to end up looking like the Hulk. Of course, some got a little bit bigger, and one of those was the Dweller in Darkness. Coming in at over 400 feet, there was pretty much no way that Shang-Chi could have stopped it without the Great Protector on his side. In The Hobbit, we meet Smaug, a fire drake from the north, who set upon the Lonely Mountain, slaying all the dwarves inside, taking on the entire army of Erebor, and taking all the gold for himself. He's known as the last of the great dragons in Middle-earth, and was an enormous and extremely powerful dragon. He's even bigger in the movies, coming in at over 400 feet long and multiple times the size of an airplane. The Chitauri Leviathan were definitely an intimidating presence when they came out of the wormhole in Avengers. They're absolutely massive, and you were kind of left wondering, how in the world were the Avengers gonna take these things down? Of course, then they were folded by just one punch from the Hulk, so not really that tough, but still, they are absolutely massive. Coming in at 521 feet, King Ghidorah is easily one of the biggest titans in the Monsterverse. He even dwarfs Godzilla by a good 100 feet. The 3-headed monster from outer space, King Ghidorah is known as a living extinction event, and is the biggest challenge that Godzilla's ever faced. The oldest titan in the Monsterverse, Shimu is also the biggest titan in the Monsterverse, standing over 533 feet tall, so just barely surpassing King Ghidorah by 12 feet. But still, Shimu is so big that both Kong and the Scar King can both ride on her back. So she's like big. Coming out of Pacific Rim, the biggest and greatest of all the kaiju from the first movie was without a doubt Slatter, standing at almost 600 feet tall. The final boss was the first Category 5 kaiju that we ever saw. It was easily the most threatening out of the bunch. He nearly destroyed the world as we know it. While Star Wars is full of monsters, some of them have already made this list. Not many of them are bigger than the Exogorth, a giant space worm that was so big that it was able to swallow the Millennium Falcon whole, and the gang didn't even realize that it had happened until it was too late. Easily the biggest version of Godzilla we've ever seen, Godzilla Earth is literally one with the Earth itself, and is 3 times bigger than the Godzilla from the Monsterverse, who was already one of the biggest versions of Godzilla himself. Yeah, Godzilla Earth is the size of mountains. He's almost in a class all his own. Shai-Hulud, or the god of Arrakis, is the giant sandworm from Dune. With the success of Dune 2, it's definitely cemented its place as one of the most iconic movie monsters of all time. It's also easily one of the biggest. Rumor has it that these things can grow up to 1,400 feet long, meaning that it can definitely swallow most any other movie monster it comes across, even Godzilla. While Cthulhu usually just resides in the books and Lovecraft lore, this eldritch monster made its way onto the big screen in a surprise cameo in Underwater. We don't have an exact size for this version of the monster, and part of that is because Cthulhu can actually adjust his size at will within the monster's lore, but we do know that it was able to destroy skyscraper-sized drills with ease and easily reach over thousands of feet tall. While Surtur in the MCU didn't start off that much, he really wasn't that much taller than even a regular person. By the end of it, once he reached Asgard, he was absolutely dwarfing castles and even mountains. Heck, at his highest, Surtur was touching the skies, over 4,000 feet tall. The Cloverfield monster definitely left an impression when it made its way onto the screen for the first time. But even though it was over 300 feet tall and could plow through a city just like other titans, in actuality, this monster was just a baby. As a fully grown adult, Clover is one of the biggest monsters in all of existence, bigger than two of the Burj Khalifas stacked on top of each other. The Lovecraftian old gods from Hellboy, the Ogdru Jihad, are eldritch monsters of immense size and power. Just one of its many offspring towered over Hellboy, but that's still nothing compared to the parents. We don't have an official size, but they can reach up to a few miles in height. The Carathin is the queen of the seas and the fierce protector of Atlantis, and pretty much nothing was more epic than seeing Aquaman ride this absolute behemoth into battle for the first time. And the Carathin is seriously big. With her massive tentacles in tow, she's clocking in at over 2 miles long. There's almost nothing that big in fiction. She's one of the largest monsters you're ever gonna see. As we've been saying, Star Wars has a whole lot of massive monsters throughout it. Pretty much none are gonna be bigger than the Summa Verminoff. This behemoth monster, that looks a heck of a lot like a multi-tentacle Cthulhu, lived in outer space among the stars. It actually lived in the Caddesi Maelstrom, a celestial storm that surrounded the planet Kessel, and at a whopping 24,000 feet long. That means that the Summa Verminoff was technically bigger than 4.5 miles across. But pretty much nothing is bigger than Void Ghidorah, the version of King Ghidorah from the Godzilla Earth universe. I mean, it's measuring over 65,000 feet long, or over 12 miles. That means if you laid it down in Manhattan, just one of its necks would span over half the island. The thing is almost as long as a half marathon. It's easily the biggest monster that we've seen up on the big screen.